Okay, so today we are going to install Zabbix on top of Rocky Linux 9, which is pretty straightforward. Let's turn on our VM. Okay, I'm using Vagrant on top of Hyper-V because it works much faster than VirtualBox on my desktop and my setup. Okay, let's get into the machine on two terminals and get in as sudo. Okay, so the first thing we are going to do is we are going to prepare the server, and we are going to get into OPT, create the source directory, and then since we installed before and a couple dependencies and updated the system, we have git. Let's clone the repository, which is public. Okay, now the first thing that we are going to do is to disable SLinux, and then we are going to install htop with which will be installed from the enterprise Linux repository, Apple, and should be pretty fast. Okay, let's get into sudo. Okay, so it's up. Okay, so now what we are going to do, we are going to go into the download section of the Zabbix site. We are going to choose packages, 7.0 long-term support version, Rocky Linux, version 9, server front-end agent on the same machine, MySQL and Apache. But we are going to use MariaDB, which will impose some difficulties while we are installing the service. Okay, so the next thing we are going to do is to get into the VM, and the first thing that we are going to do, we are going to install the latest MariaDB database server. This scriptofine removes any dependencies from the old version which might be installed on the system. Going later aren't uninstalled, and then we are going to install the newest and latest version of MariaDB. My setup is for about 1K hosts, monitoring using ping and SNMP, and there are a couple of fine-tunings you should know about we will do in my setup, and it's probably a good thing that you will do the same changes for your setup if it's a big one. For most very small setups, it's not required. Okay, so to understand the issues, first of all, the database that we are using will have lots of connections, and also a lot of the data which will be sitting in the database will be fetched by the Zabbix service, and due to this it will need a lot of cache memory. Okay, so the machine have 4 GB of RAM and 4 GB of swap. For this kind of setup you will need a little bit more in some cases. Okay, so the first thing by the manual that we need to do is to edit the YAM repository, the DNF repository of Apple, and append here the exclude packages Zabbix, anything that starts with Zabbix, which means that it will not pull from the Apple repository any Zabbix package. Okay, the next thing we are going to install the repository of Zabbix, the 7th release. Okay, install. Okay, be pretty fast. Okay, now the next thing that we are going to do is to install all these packages, which will install also a lot of dependencies such as Apache and PHP, but we need to add the SSL mode, so the SSL port 443 will be available for our use on Apache. Okay, now let's install everything. Should be pretty fast. Okay, small download. Okay, now we need to initialize the database. Have it here. Okay. Okay, so we disabled SE Linux, but we didn't reboot the machine yet. Another tool that we need to install is traceroute. fping is being installed, but not traceroute, which is a bit weird actually. Okay, now let's enable start and enable MariaDB. Start, enable. By default it comes without any password, and I prefer to use it this way because I'm the root user and I don't want to enter every time my password. It's a secure server. Okay, now let's create a database with the password. We are enabling here something specific to allow the fast installation of or creation of the database. Okay, the next thing is to on the next one, which will take this file, extract it and push it, pump it into the Zabbix database with the Zabbix user, and we will need to put in to enter in the password, which is password, and this one should take a while. Okay, let's see what happens here. Let's go into CPU, stored by CPU. Okay, the database is working a little bit. Okay, it should take about half a minute, depends on the system speed. On a specific server I've used, it took less than a minute. Okay, the next step are to disable this function, and then we will edit the Zabbix file, Zabbix server conf, and we need to change there a couple of things. The first thing is the database password, and then a couple other things. Okay, so the database initialization is finished. Okay, so now let's edit the Zabbix server configuration, and let's look up for this. Okay. Password, small letters. Okay, the next thing that we are going to change is actually to allow unsupported database versions, because the version that we are using is newer than what the 7th version of Zabbix knows about. Okay, the next thing is script, allow script, external scripts. No, enable global scripts. Okay, now let's see if there's another thing. Okay, so this should be it. Now the next thing that you're going to fine tune is the MariaDB server connections limit. Let's find it. MariaDB connection limit. We will have to change this one to at least 800. Okay, and I remembered another thing we need to change here is the cache. The cache size should be about 2 gigabytes for my use case. Usually you don't need so much cache, but in my case it's about 1K hosts. Okay, so the next thing is password and couple of things. Now let's fine tune PHP. PHP, 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 PHP. Okay, so we are going to allow scripts to run an hour and the upload of one file to 50 megabytes and for a single post to be 100 megabytes, and the limit we are going to change it to 512 megabytes. Okay, this one should work as I think so. Okay, this is what I'm seeing right now. Let's try this one. Okay, let's restart the services. Seems to work fine. Let's enable the services for them to start after a reboot. Now the firewall, we need to add a service HTTP, HTTPS, permanent also, these two. Okay, let's add specific tool DNF install IPT state, which will show us the firewall connection tracking table. Okay, let's run it. Okay, we see connections, internal connections, external connections. Okay, now the next thing is to go into the web user interface, which is this IP HTTPS, and let's try it. Okay, it's saying that the certificate is bad, but it's okay for us. Now let's get into Zabbix folder. Now we need to set up, let's see. Okay, next. Okay, all the limits are okay, are fine. Okay, this is the compatibility. Okay, now we have to change the password only because we use the defaults, which is password. Okay, next step, and ng tab is the next one. Let's change the localization, the time zone to my local time, which is Asia, Jerusalem. Okay, next, finish. Okay, the username is admin with the capital A, the password is Zabbix, small letters. Okay, we are in. Okay, now let's add a specific host, which will be Google. Let's create host, hostname dns.google. Okay, we need to add it into a group. Let's select a group. Let's say Linux servers, whatever. Okay, the interface. We must have one interface and for it to have the an IP or DNS domain, DNS address, for us to use any checks. It takes the agent IP and use it. Okay, so now let's add this, but now we need the template. Let's select the template, ICMP. Okay, doesn't find like this, ICMP. Okay, ICMP ping. Okay, so we have a host. Let's edit. Okay, we have DNS Google. Okay, it will also send maybe no, it will not use Zabbix. Okay, so now let's see. Graphs. Don't have any graphs. Okay, let's get into DNS Google. No, that's the okay. Monitoring hosts. Let's try to ping Google. and it works. Let's try to trace route, and it works. Okay, so now let's see the latest data. Okay, we have ICMP response time. Let's see the graph. The last 5 minutes. Okay, so we see something. 25 milliseconds. Pretty slow actually. Should be about 8 milliseconds, but never mind. Okay. Okay, so that's it. That's it. And let's get into data collection and host. We can use the import function and remove the delete missing, and we can add JSON, YAML, and a couple other things. Let's export a specific host to see how the format looks like. Okay. Okay, let's open the file. Okay, so it belongs to a group with a specific UUID, which can be similar to every host we want to add, and a couple other things. So, for example, if we want to add another host, what we will need to do is to actually copy this section, add another one, and let's take, for example, Cloudflare. Okay, Linux servers, another one. Okay, seems pretty simple. Okay, so now let's save this and get into import, and let's select the Zabbix host, import, and we have also DNS Cloudflare, and it's configured. Let's get into monitoring, hosts, Cloudflare, ping. Okay, Google, not Google, Cloudflare, trace route. Okay, it works. So that's it, a simple installation. The idea is that I have a set of hosts which I want to add actually with as a MikroTik devices, and I added about 3K of them, which is pretty nice. Have a nice day, good luck.